Testing, testing. Testing, testing. All right, let me turn down the music there. All right, I'm looking at my audio levels. Oh, that alarm wasn't necessary. Okay. Oh yeah, I forgot to. All right, so I wanted to do something different today. I've been on in a while. I don't know. I've been trying to think about all the different. I just been exploring a lot of different projects recently. Let me kill the music. It's very distracting. And I don't know. I was getting my car tuned up this morning. I had to take it to the smog test, and then I had to go get the oil changed and everything. And so I was stuck for a couple hours in a different part of town, on my phone reading. And I was reading a lot of public intellectuals. Let me transition here. And I don't know, it just occurred to me that I consume a lot of public intellectuals. I have since I was, a teenager at least. And so this is probably not everyone's cup of tea, but I'm going to try it because I think maybe it'll suit me, maybe it won't. But I kind of wanted to commentate on some of these public intellectuals. Yeah, because I actually, like I said, I actually consume them a fair amount. So basically the two I was going to hit on today is I saw a Jordan Peterson interview with Tim Ferris, and it was great because I was stuck at the car dealership, so I could just read it on my phone. He put up the whole transcript. So I think I found the transcript on my computer. I was reading it on my phone, but I think I have it. I just wanted to run through it and give them my thoughts on some of these things. And it'll probably be more neuroscience stuff, but I don't know. I'm trying not to be overly narrow, because I don't live my life that way. I don't really walk around identifying myself as a neuroscientist or anything. I actually, like I said, I go to the bookstore and read a lot of more general things. So anyway, Jordan Peterson was one thing I was consuming today, and then Jeff Hawkins, which I think I've mentioned on this, whatever this is, a show or whatever, before, and he's been doing a lot of interviews because he's also pushing a book out. In the future, we can talk about other people. I see Andrew Huberman popping up a lot. I haven't really consumed his stuff as much. I have a very superficial impression of him that isn't very positive. I think he's it's a little. Well, I don't know. I should have a better substantial thing to say about him before I talk about him. But yeah, I don't know, some of these people. So instead of just torturing the people in my life with my opinions on that, I thought maybe I'd try to articulate them in a more public venue. So I called this stream the anti-public intellectual stream, which is insanely hypocritical and kind of funny because, at least the public intellectuals are... I have a very dim view of public intellectuals in a lot of ways, which is funny because I consume them a lot and there's a lot of cognitive dissonance there. But I don't know. There's a lot of showmanship and stuff like that. There's a lot of silliness. So, but they're putting their ideas out there, so we can respond to them and criticize them. But on the other hand, they are putting themselves out there too, and I don't really do that. So, whatever. I'm giving it a shot. So basically, I read this Tim Ferris interview of Jordan Peterson. So weirdly, I actually met Tim Ferris a couple times because when I was in grad school, he was coming by our lab. My PI was a little bit of a celebrity hound, so he used to chase down these people. So for like a few weeks, he was supposed to come by our lab, and I only saw him a couple times, but he showed up to our lab meetings and stuff. And I don't know, he might have been very like socially anxious or defensive, but he came off a little bit kind of arrogant to me. And whatever, you're gonna realize I have a negative opinion of a lot of people, but that's just how he struck me. It's not a big deal. I mean, but yeah, I forget what book he was working on at the time. I've actually read most of his books, even though I kind of sound dismissive of Tim Ferris. Yeah, so if I remember all of them, I read them all as they came out. So, and he's been publishing for at least 10 years now. So he had the 4-hour work day or work week. I remember my roommate in college was obsessed with that. The idea of whittling your work down to that, which now with like coronavirus and stuff, it seems less fantastic, because a lot of people I know were forced into a remote schedule. I don't know. He wrote a few books. He wrote the one that came out maybe like 5 years ago that I remember was probably like 6 or 7. It was he was just interviewing a bunch of famous people and giving their advice on life. And my PI was in that book. PI meaning principal investigator, which is like a professor that runs a lab or research. That's what they call him. So that's why I think he was hanging around because and then he was also interested in performance, and our lab was studying brain performance. So he was supposed to like show up every day and shadow one of the postdocs. I was only a grad student at the time, but he didn't. He just sort of. I remember the postdoc being annoyed because he sort of rearranged everything. Because there's a difference between running research efficiently and running research so that an observer can get something out of it. So he had rearranged his whole setup so that there could be somebody in the room, or he could be observing the whole time, and then he never really showed up. He only. So anyway, even though he had insisted vehemently that he would, but anyway, him and my PI are very similar. They're both these short guys that really like wine and really like to socialize. They're kind of socialites, but anyway, whatever. I just assume my stuff will never get more than like 100 views. So collectively on all the platforms. So I'm totally shit talking them. But anyway, this interview was kind of interesting. So I've heard Jordan Peterson before and stuff like that. I like a lot of what he says in terms of psychology stuff. I actually. I don't naturally gravitate towards his stuff. It's just there's people in my life that like him a lot, and they always think I would like him. And I think it's partly because I was raised in the Midwest, so I have this like puritanical Midwestern kind of vibe about me that has probably faded over time. But I know a bunch of people in California, and I think they think there's something familiar about Peterson and the way I talk sometimes. So. And then of course he's like an intellectual, and I can be like that. Anyway, so this interview is kind of interesting. So I read it, like I said, at the dealership this morning. And I just wanted to skim through it and slow down at the parts that, so I know Peterson, he was like in rehab recently, and now he's pushing his, second book. I think, what was it? Who he's in rehab for a Klonopin or something, which is it was interesting. It was kind of surprising to me because I know he's a psychologist. He's not a psychiatrist. Like he doesn't necessarily deal with drugs. Although I know he did neuropsychopharmacology either as his PhD focus or his postdoctoral training. But he probably focused on like one drug. I think he focused on alcohol or something. So I guess that's different than a clinical training. So I was a little surprised that he was so cavalier and ended up with so much trouble with Klonopin. But the other side of it, I guess, is that he was just following the clinical advice, and and then ended up having a terrible withdrawal problem, which it is terrible. I mean, all those drugs that you're taking consistently, like that has like some sort of sedating effect because you have anxiety, then your brain can develop these they're called paradoxical reactions. So you get used to that chemical being around all the time, or your brain does. It's almost like if it produced it endogenously because you take it so consistently. So all your pathways start to adapt in a way, and it could be at the neurotransmitter receptor level. It could be in networks that we don't understand yet. There's a lot of ways it could actually happen. The explanation isn't really the most important, although there will be a lot more science in the future that will discover what's going on there. But the point is, it just adapts to that, and then so when you suddenly pull it away, you can have these like, imagine just getting shot with like a tube full of epinephrine or something, because your brain's constantly operating under this suppressant. So anyway, that's all I know too much about it. I that he was in rehab. It sounds like he's doing better. So that's good. I mean, so he did the 12 Rules for Life, and now he's doing another book. And hey, I'm so glad you're streaming. Oh, thanks, man. Hey, I'm so glad people are still showing up. Yeah, like I said at the beginning, I just needed to take a break. I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing with my life, so I apologize. This one's going to be a little different. I'm really trying to today focus on some of these intellectuals and comment on their stuff rather than get super into neuroscience. Although I just realized I just yammered about neuropharmaceuticals, but yeah, I'm hoping to just maybe like do an hour today, and then I've been working a lot of projects on in my life on the side. So I've been podcasting with my friends, which has actually been a lot of fun. I put the whole neurotech thing on hold. I don't know. Whatever. Also, work's been really busy because I have a full-time job too. So my mania lets me do a lot of things, but sometimes it overwhelms me. So anyway, so So Tim Ferris, Jordan Peterson. So yeah, can you guys see this? Oh yeah, I realized I was reading about Twitch almost a month ago, and I realized a lot of people are watching on mobile, so I should make this as big as possible. Okay, now I don't know where I was. Okay, this is actually way harder to skim now, but let me just make this window really big so I can look ahead. All right, that's not bad. So when I do find something, hopefully you can read it now, but I don't know if that's nauseating when I scroll. I apologize. I get motion sick from motion like that, but anyway, okay, so where is the window? The window is, sorry, give me a second. This is going to drive me crazy. All right, let me fix the window here. Yeah, I don't know when the last time I was on and what while I fix this window. I did try to play Cyber Punk. I feel like a month ago at this point, maybe a few weeks ago, but I actually couldn't handle it. The nausea, it made me too. I was powering through it. I got through an hour of it, but I was kind of forcing myself. And I get very nauseated, and then I'm just like wiped out for 2 days. It's really weird, but that's what happens with me when there's 3D environments, and especially when there's like walls close to your eyes and they're swinging around. Like if it's like outdoors, like Call of Duty kind of stuff, I can handle that a little better. But anyway, I've just thought of it because of the motion sickness of the scrolling. All right, so. Yeah, he had this story about this person, this friend of his who became the premier of Alberta. It was kind of interesting. He's talking about how cold and frontiery it is up there in that part of Canada. And I think he said Tim Ferris was from Minnesota, and he was kind of teasing him about how that's not really that cold. I'm from Wisconsin originally, so I grew up there till I was about 10. And he was saying how it's like below negative 40 for like a month straight, which is crazy because even in some of the worst winters, it was like maybe with wind chill, it would get that low, but not actual temperature. But anyway, yeah, so they were talking about that stuff. Of course, he loves Solzhenitsyn. He always brings up these Russian. Let me keep going. Dostoevsky, of course. All the depressed Russian writers, which is cool. Nietzsche, however you say his name. There was a part that was interesting to me because he was talking about I don't take any psychedelics or anything, but they were talking about psychedelics. It must be a little further. And there's a lot of psychology here, a lot of self-management stuff, which is good. It's not terribly interesting to me, sort of at the point I'm at, but I understand how it's interesting to a lot of people. I end up talking about it with a lot of other people in my life, who are trying to handle stuff. So that's good. That's a good service, I suppose, to talk about that stuff. But they talk about DMT and psychedelics a little bit further down here, and I thought, he can be kind of dramatic sometimes. Jordan Peterson, I think he's a little prone to drama and even histrionics a little bit, slaying dragons and all that. But he had this what do you call it? Description of it was one of the first guys to do psychedelic research in the United States in the 90s. He's a professor at New Mexico. I realized I should have just pulled this up because that's probably the only thing I was interested in here. Yeah, they're talking about politics. They talk about a lot of things. Oh, here it is. All right, sorry about that. Sorry about all that scrolling. Rick Strassman. Yeah, so I didn't know who that was. Let me scroll it up a little bit. All right, cool. Yeah, and when I see psychedelic stuff, I usually I'm not that interested. But he was describing how this guy did an experiment with a number of subjects, and all of them reported something very consistent. Yeah, see, here's where he's talking about his research. I apologize. This is not the... where is it? Oh, yeah, so Tim Ferris is talking about him. He tries to get involved in all these studies. MDMA, psilocybin, whatever, psilocybin, yeah. And the scientists are talking about Griffiths. Yeah, see, I'm not super up to date on this stuff, like in terms of the people. I know Rogan loves to talk about this, Joe Rogan, because he's really into mind altering stuff. But anyway, so I was looking up the guy. What's his name? Rick Strassman. Here it is. So let's just look him up. So apparently he wrote and did this documentary on the spirit molecule. He was a professor at New Mexico for a while. Anyway, I can't find it in the interview, but let's say reported. Just type in angels because I know they're talking about aliens. Is that it? Okay. Yeah, here it is. Yeah, see, like this, there's so much drama in his language. So that's partly why things are mysterious. I mean, Rick Strassman, he terrified himself right out of the DMT research, as far as I could tell, because all the subjects came back and said, well, I went somewhere and saw aliens. And then they thought it was more real than life. That was their response. And I don't know why this is so, like, mysterious or whatever. There's a very, like, seems to me to be a very straightforward explanation for this. it seems like people are looking for this to be, more mysterious than it is. And there's something else he said too that has the exact same explanation. Where he's talking about, there's a meaningful aspect to it that we don't understand, and that people just had a sense of this being like one of the most meaningful experiences they ever had. This researcher, I didn't set it up very well. He's basically injecting people with this MDMA, some high dose of it, and they all. This is all unpublished, so we don't really, and there's, I don't know how much it's been reproduced, but even if it's completely true and been reproduced 100 times, I still think it's explained. So the two kind of astounding things in the way that it's being told in this interview is, one, that people report an extremely high sense of meaning from this experience, like one of the most meaningful things that ever happened in their life, and two, that it was actually more real than life out down here. Yeah, actually more real than life. And to me, this is not that mysterious, because I understand that if you experience this, the feeling itself will probably overwhelm your cognitive capacity to tear this apart logically. But as a third-party observer, it seems to me that you have these brainstem level centers that assign meaning to experiences. So as memories are encoded, there's salience and all these dimensions that we try to extract, arousal, but whatever combinations of those lead to basically meaning encoding. And it might be that this drug just hyperactivates some of those areas. So if you're chemically getting those meaning areas hyperactivated, which are supposed to not be directly activated by drugs normally, but they're supposed to respond to, say, your internal body state. So if you have an experience, but then your heart's racing a little bit and your skin is sweating, your brain is sensing those things and using them as inputs, even though to some extent different parts of your brain are causing those to happen. The parts of your brain that are encoding the memories are also encoding your internal body states. And so if you're a little anxious, you're a little worried, you're a little frightened, you're a little in awe, awe being just the simple like mismatch between what you've expected from your past to what you're experiencing or seeing or hearing. Those meaning centers start to get stronger. And that's because there's something, say, meaningful, or if we try to use a different word, more relevant, worth taking note. So if this chemical is just, if those areas have a certain, have a concentration of neurotransmitter receptors that this chemical activates, I don't understand why this is not. They're talking about it as if it's mysterious, and I really despise this kind of stuff, because I think there is enough mystery out there, but you don't have to inject it or look for it where it doesn't exist. So maybe they genuinely do think it's mysterious as they are portraying it. But that was the main thing. I just had to look up what's his name, Rick Strassman. I was just curious what he had done. Apparently, he did a documentary in 2010. With Joe Rogan as a narrator, which I haven't seen. Maybe I should watch it. Don't some dreams meet that odd sensation more real than real? Yeah, exactly. I have those dreams. I actually am a pretty vivid dreamer. So I wake up sometimes and I'm like a little disoriented. It sounds odd, but I've had that since I was young. Like I have these like experiences of a different life or something, and then I wake up and then I'm like, wait, who am I again? Like real disorientation a little bit. But it comes back to me within, really fast. So that's biologically motivated without a drug. Yes, I know you're forced to communicate your point through a keyboard and chat, so I apologize. So I'm not getting your intonation or everything, and you're trying to write shorthand. So I'm not sure if you're saying that you're arguing against what I'm saying, or yeah, I just I can't really tell, but I'm, because I can interpret that two different ways. But I'm saying that to me, it's clear that these centers in the brain are really just there to like tag metadata to your memories, if you will. And I agree with me. Okay, cool. I was just, I mean, you could disagree with me. I was just trying to understand if you were making some very subtle point against what I was saying that I should consider. But yeah, the metadata kind of is like one way to look at it. And if you have an exogenous way to manipulate that, you know, and it makes sense too that dreams, which are more like chaotic and likely to produce things that really don't match your expectations, you know, sort of like more random firing. And then you have these, say, call them narrative centers that are trying to make sense of it in your brain, that are inputting those random firings. And then you end up with this crazy story. And then at the higher levels of your brain, you're like, this crazy story doesn't match what I've experienced. That those centers would now activate because they're like, you know, maybe there's important information in this, even though it's literally just a dream. But to me, that, I mean, the easiest way to understand it is when you're, you know, in awake and conscious, and you have something that extreme or interesting or whatever happened to you. And I'm not trying to negate the experience, but it's strange because they're talking about this in the context of science, as a scientific conversation. And you know, he likes to tilt into the religious narratives, which I don't have a problem with. I was actually raised with a lot of different kinds of religions. I was exposed to a lot of different religions as a kid, but I don't understand as a neuro psychological, as somebody who's studied neuropharmacological psychology, why that's not at least one possible explanation that's readily apparent to him. So that's it. Yeah, I'm just going to go through the rest of this really fast. See if I see anything else about the MDA thing, because I don't know if I've done their side justice, but yeah, and if you care, as Tim Ferris, Jordan Peterson, that's the thing you can Google. But I didn't watch the video; I just read it, so it's probably good enough. Yeah, it's interesting. He's talking about working on a book and kind of falling apart because he is no longer a professor and he no longer does clinical practice, and you know, kind of needing some sort of structure in your life, which I have experience with. That feeling, you know, where you're motivated to get to the place where you have freedom, and then once you get it, it's not necessarily good for you, because like the act of going in somewhere every day, you know. So because I sort of got a remote position a few years ago, so before coronavirus even, but it is weird. You do have to keep yourself busy, otherwise it gets very negative. Neither authors have real experience, Peterson and Ferris. Yeah, Ferris certainly not. Ferris is just sort of a public kind of celebrity slash kind of journalist, you know, like amateur journalist in a way. Peterson, he's got over 100 authored publications. He taught at Harvard. He taught at some, I think, University of Toronto, some Canadian university. He does a lot more work in clinical psychology, so like the Big Five and Ocean, he's done a lot of work in that. He's got expertise for sure. You know, maybe it's the lack of the psychopharmacology or in psychedelics, but like I don't have expertise in the psychedelics really either. I was just a little surprised that, you know, just by being scientific or whatever, or say, scientific is too heavy a word. Just by being like a more clear thinker, you can't come up with an explanation. Yeah, let me just, yeah, he rambled really at the end there. just like I'm doing. MDMA. Okay. Science. Yeah, I don't know. I can't find the comment, but he did say something. Do I want to become famous? No, I'm good. Well, that's all right. I don't need to be famous. All right. Jeff Hawkins. Finally ready to explain his brain research. Okay, so Jeff Hawkins. All right, so this is the other guy I'm going to do today, and I don't know, maybe I'll get off soon after this, but I like Jeff Hawkins a lot. I think his first book, I did finally read his first. He just came out with his second book. His first book was like in 2005, and then he just published his second book like this year, or maybe it was the end of last year. His first book is definitely better. His first book, and I haven't gone back and reread his first book, but I read his first book. This is before I was in any school, grad school, anything. So I might have a bias because I was young, and he might be presenting a lot of ideas that I just hadn't been exposed to yet. His first book's called On Intelligence, and then his second book is Jeff Hawkins' book. 1,000 Brains. Okay. So this was the other kind of person I've been ingesting recently I was at the dealership and I saw my phone recommends me stuff, and I was like, oh yeah. His first book's really good. It's called On Intelligence. I read it 16 years ago or whatever. No, I actually read it a couple years after it came out, but so like 13 years ago. His first book is got some real good ideas, especially if you're going into neuroscience, because they don't get the representation, I guess, in the sciences. So like the most dramatic one I can think of is the idea of the cortex, the cortex and the brain just being a single sort of unit that just gets repeated over this entire surface of the brain. That there's nothing particularly specialized about one part of the cortex versus another part of the cortex, which is where scientists almost universally how they talk about it. And so I remember being at UCLA or there was like a conference over the week. I was on campus for some reason, and I walked into the main. I don't know if you've ever guys been at the UCLA campus. There's I don't remember what this is called anymore. Near Kirkhoff, there's a giant, like where this union is. There was this giant conference going on, so I just snuck in. I wasn't part of it or anything. And there was this debate going on in the stage of developmental neuroscience somethings. People debating about how does the brain develop, and and some of these people had done like research with infants, and maybe some of them had done embryological research. I don't know. But to me, they were having a debate about it's like the nature versus nurture stuff. It's like Noam Chomsky famously, talks about. Noam Chomsky's research is probably like 60 years old now, but the idea of is language. His stuff is goofy, but is it like an intrinsic outreach from the way your brain's wired, or do you learn it? I guess he's trying to say that there's like intrinsic ways about the way your brain works that has nothing to do with nurture or your environment. Anyway, I liked Hawkins' thing because it was very straightforward. It's very simple. He's an engineer, so basically his story is really cool. He tried to get into a PhD program, and he might have successfully got in. I don't know. He got MIT and Berkeley. He was going to do a PhD in neuroscience, and it's probably like 30 years ago. And he wanted to work on like almost like a computational level of how the brain works, and he couldn't find a PI or a mentor that would do that. So he left and he went to work for Palm Pilot, which was a big company in the 90s before cell phones, before smartphones. and he worked his way up in that company, and he made a ton of money. Like he's worth like $500 million now. And so around the early 2000s, he quit once he sold whatever that was, his company or whatever, to Palm Pilot or something like that. And then he put a bunch of his money into neuroscience research. And he's been doing neuroscience research for the last 15, 20 years. A lot of it funded by himself. And he has an institute called the Redwood Science Institute near Berkeley. And they study very basic mechanistic things about the brain, and I think they do a lot of rat research. Anyway, so he's trying to build AI based on how the human brain works. Anyway, he's a cool dude. His second book is about the 1,000 brains theory. I don't know if I have the bandwidth to get into it today. It's always hard without too much feedback, or say not enough feedback, but so let me see if I can pull up an interview of his. Oh yeah, they got his whole story here. Okay, that's good. Oh yeah, he founded Palm Computing, and then U.S. Robotics acquired it in 1996 for $44 million. Oh, and then he founded another company, which is how he got all the other money. Okay, cool. Anyway, yeah. So I always found that refreshing, the concept in his first book, which was, the concept is that there's the cortical structure, which is like basically 6 layers of cells. It's kind of like, how we visualize neural networks now. It's like a 6-layer neural network, and it just repeats all over the cortex of your brain. And his whole theory that seems more and more and more likely to be true as the years go on is that the layers just adapt depending on what kind of inputs it's getting. So the reason your visual cortex is different from your auditory cortex is just by simply that when you were an embryo or an infant, your eyeballs were hooked up to the visual cortex and your ears were hooked up to the auditory cortex. So the cortex naturally and intrinsically becomes, what it needs to become because of the type of inputs that are coming in. That's the basics of it. But I really like that. So I'd read that book years before I went to grad school for neuroscience, and I felt like it really helped having that model in my head. He's basically trying to expand on it now, and it's not as good in my opinion. The reason he calls it the 1,000 brains theory is just the idea that different parts of your brain are all acting in parallel on their own little bits of information, and then he says there's sort of basically like a voting process, why collectively you'll reach a certain singular conclusion on something. He's kind of like trying to be very modelly about the brain. And then he talks about reference frames a lot, which is already a thing in a lot of brain research. Like in memory research, we call it context. He calls it reference frames, which actually his word might be better, but it's already a concept that's out there. Yeah, I don't know how much to get into it, but I always was kind of tempted to write a book on how the brain works because, I don't know. I just don't know how interesting it is. There was a report I read like 8 years ago, something like that, 2013, I think, 2012. There was like a DARPA report on multi-level modeling. Multi-level modeling is just the idea of there's always these complicated words for simple concepts. It's the idea of like, most college age people like the idea of how physics sort of is the basis of chemistry is the basis of biology is the basis of say psychology or whatever. Psychology is based on sociology. The idea of you have layers, right? Which is insanely like sloppy and not true because we have no ways to like connect those things. We sometimes find little ways to connect them, but they're more internally connected than they are connected to the next layer. But multi-level modeling is a thing that we like try to make work over and over and over again. And same thing with DARPA. They funded I think the RAND Corporation to look into multi-level modeling. But multi-level modeling is like very useful for education research because they use multi-level modeling. I think it's the most intuitive example is if you have a classroom full of children, with a teacher, and then at the school level you have many classrooms, and then at the district level you have many schools. I think it's simple what I'm saying, but you can sort of understand the hierarchy of effects, if you will. Say this is and then whatever. I mean, it's a hierarchy. I don't need to draw it, but the idea is that there's so there is like multi-level modeling statistics, which will I don't know if you guys are familiar with like regressions and stuff, but if you have basically two factors, say I don't know, and then we're trying to predict something. A linear regression approach is simply trying to find constants that you're solving for the constants, and then we have a third one too. This is, I guess, coefficients rather, and then the constant. So you're just solving for these to get these independent variables to maximally correlate with this. Multi-level modeling will take into account the hierarchy, or it's one way to take into account the hierarchy. That there's always many possibilities, but anyway, so that's more explicitly multi-level modeling. I think it's interesting because I think in with the way the brain works and the way human language works, that we intrinsically have multi-levels. But in memory research, they call it context. In Jeff Hawkins' model, he calls it reference frames. Doesn't really matter. The idea is just that, like, if you learn things in one context, it sort of gets bucketed in that context, and then if you move to a different context, it doesn't necessarily get remembered or cued in that context. That's pretty clear from memory research that happens. That's why to study something or to even get trained on something, you have to study it in more than one context so that your brain starts to generalize it. So yeah, I mean, my point being, like, there's probably like a list of, say 5 to 10 features of the brain you could make. And I always thought, like, maybe, I should just do that. Because that's what Hawkins is trying to do with his newest book, but it's not comprehensive, and it's not complete, and it's not polished or finished, or it's not well defined. So I don't know, but it's cool. I mean, it's cool because he's basically a person who's an engineer, made a ton of money, and then went back to neuroscience, which is what he always was interested in. He funded it, and then he has a company that does AI stuff, but it doesn't use neural networks. Doesn't use neural like what people are using. Most people use convolutional neural networks. They're working on some different architecture. I forget what it's called. Hierarchical temporal modeling or something. I feel like there's another word, HTM, or there might be another, or maybe there's an L in there, long-term HTM, or I don't know. Anyway, it's some architecture for computer science stuff. I'd read it. Oh, okay, cool. You read The Thousand Brains, Dirk Pools? Yeah, that's like kind of last thing I want to talk about today. Yeah, Oh yeah, cool. Yeah, I skimmed it in the bookstore finally. Like last week, I was in a bookstore, so I went through it. I don't know what you thought. Um, I think I'm highly biased because I spent years doing memory research, and then years before that doing cognitive science, attention, and other types of the brain. Basically, I spent almost uh, I guess 7 years doing brain research in humans. So I realized I might just be biased because it didn't seem that interesting to me or that great. And the first book I hadn't even done any grad school yet, and I thought it was great. So, but it did spark a thought in my brain, like, oh, maybe I should try to. I wrote this report a long time ago, like 2013. I wrote this report for in response to the DARPA report about what I thought were the 5 features of the brain. You should write it. Thank you. I appreciate that. I really do. Like another feature of the brain, for instance, is that brain works in sort of a Bayesian, you can call it a Bayesian statistical way, which is a really simple concept. It's just the idea that you got normal statistics it gets very confusing for no reason, but it's really just observations, right? It's frequency. So if you observe something happen 10 out of 100 times, you can talk about the frequency that would likely work or whatever. That's like frequency statistics, which is you just observe things a bunch of times and then you can predict the 101st time rather, what is the likelihood of that happening, and based on previous experience, so you're just using frequency. It's very basic, very straightforward. Bayesian, what I'm saying is that basic or straightforward is like with no education. If you had enough time to sit down and think about it, you would probably try that approach, or you're just intuitively doing it. Bayesian just adds like 2 more things to that. So instead of the frequentist kind of observation approach, the idea is that it's a way to sort of average multiple observations together. So if you I can't think of a good scenario or something off the top of my head that would be good, but it's like if you say, I assume you don't move, like you don't live in Seattle, for instance. So if you moved to Seattle for, I don't know, say like 100 days, and you observe that it rained like 60 out of the 100 days or something like that, you know that there's like a 60% chance of rain according to your own observations, right? And then say a few years later, you move back and you live there for say another 100 days, and it rains 90 out of the 100 days. So if somebody asks you what's the probability of it raining the next day, you might say 90%. Bayesian is just like, how do you combine these 2 observations? And obviously you can just average them together, right? That's actually technically that's Bayesian. Because this is your prior, and this is your observation or whatever, and then when you combine them, you get your whatever the Latin word is, I forget. I'm totally blanking. Prior and whatever, it'll come to me. Posterior and prior, yeah, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's all this confusing language for nothing. So that's Bayesian. Bayesian adds 2 things. One is the ability to combine past observations with your current observations, which is just kind of like simple addition and division or multiplication or whatever. And then number 2, the idea of assigning confidences to your observations. So for instance, maybe you have some like reason to think, like when you lived there years ago for 100 days, the weather is now a lot different. So you don't give this 0.5 and give this 0.5. You actually weight this a lot weaker. You just decide to weight this like 0.2 and this 0.8. So when you mean them, it's closer to, this was 90 and this was 60 or something. It's closer to this because you've just decided to weight it more. And you have some reason you've made up. This is the problem with Bayesian statistics and science. They act like it's more sophisticated, but there's just a lot more arbitrary bias that's imported because you have to pick either you have to either pick your posterior, prior, I forget what one this is called, or you have to pick these weights. I mean, if you don't pick any of them, you can't solve for them. So anyway, my point being that that's one feature of the brain. The brain actually works like this. The brain combines previous experience with the current set of new experiences you have. It does that by a weighting procedure. And in my opinion, it also saves metadata on your sort of confidence. So, it's not that complicated, but if you have, you were 10 years old and you saw 60% rain, and then you moved back there when you're 15, 60% rain, 18, 60% rain, and now you're like 22 and it's like 90% rain or something like that. You might have a lot of confidence in these. You might have low confidence in this. Like you combine this, but my point is your brain not only remembers or, it roughly remembers, say, frequencies, which is all probabilities are. It also remembers like weightings, which are experienced by you as confidence. So you not only do you have like a guess, you have a sense of how confident you are in that guess. So that's like one feature of the brain. The brain is sort of Bayesian, and then I can just break it down like I did. So I think there's honestly, there's only maybe half a dozen things like that would actually explain most of the brain. And I thought he was trying to do that, but I didn't think it was. I mean, it wasn't my cup of tea, but yeah, maybe that's another freaking crazy project I can give myself. But yeah, I appreciate that feedback. Are the probabilities combined mathematically accurately by our brains, or is it more subjective? I think at some level it is mathematical. It's just not going to be represented in the way we're used to. Like it's not necessarily like, decimals and the math we use, but there is combinations in the way you have populations of neurons that fire, and they fire strongly or weakly, and it is on a continuous. They're not binary. Like once you get a whole population of neurons together, there's a whole range that they can output. It's more like a violin string, say, than a piano, which is discrete, right? So those strength of output, say your collective memory, which is all your experiences combined, is outputting, and then your new one is outputting a certain strength. Yes, I play piano. Okay. Well, yeah, there you go. And those are, what I'm saying is they're continuous and they're combined. So they are essentially mathematical in that way. I don't think like the operations are the way that we do operations in math, but it is, it might get, kind of reduced, but, yeah. I mean, I do think when people say something like they're 87% sure, obviously that's probably just a made up number, but yeah. So that's cool. Play piano. I didn't get the musical training as a child, so I didn't have Asian parents or cultured parents, so I didn't think that stuff was important, but yeah, it's definitely something I'm lacking, but that's very cool. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know. I was just trying to do this I just felt like doing this today, and I say crap like that all the time, and the people at work believe me. Oh, that probabilities are mathematically made up percentages. Yeah. Oh yeah, you just gotta triple down. You can't back up on that stuff. Yeah, I know people like. I think there's been psychological studies that shown this, but psychological studies are so stupid. I mean, if you observe people and you're aware of most of that stuff, you're past the literature. The literature is like kind of remedial about human behavior. But yeah, definitely by being having more significant digits definitely confers confidence in people. I mean, to an extent, obviously, but yeah, I think there's been studies that probably have shown that. So yeah, I'm like 63.5% sure I will come back and do something like this again. Just gonna throw that percentage out there. Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of doing a podcast for fun with my friends, which has been really, really nice. And then I thought maybe I could do more public I don't want to say attack, but comment on these public intellectuals more. I watch like Lex Friedman sometimes, and some of those people on there. I don't watch him super frequently, but I see like the clips of Joe Rogan when he has people, or I used to watch him, I guess. I don't really watch him anymore. But like, yeah, I don't know. I don't understand. I guess you just got to get out there consistently and just keep giving your opinions on stuff. And obviously a certain percentage of people have to like what you're saying and find the way you say it compelling. But yeah, I don't know. So yeah, I'm gonna think on that. Maybe I'll start warring with some of these people just for fun. Try to stir up internet drama. I'm probably not gonna do that. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for showing up. The people on the other platform who are oddly silent, I appreciate that's the eyeball or two. Dark Pulse, thank you for chatting with me. I guess VLDT probably left already, but they stopped by. All right, thanks everybody. That's it. I don't know if you have any thoughts. You can tweet them or something. I don't know what the best way to get in contact with me, but anyway, good luck with whatever. I assume most of you are in school. That's what my experience talking to you guys have been told me, or my analytics. But good luck with midterm finals, spring break. I don't know what's coming up.